I have one doc who sends me a handful, maybe 4 patients a month, but every single one of those patients start, no matter what. So I sent my team and they hung out with that doc in the practice to kind of hear what was said during those types of referrals. And then we went out and we started training other referring offices to do that with lunch and learns and kind of subtle things and deliveries. And it was a game changer. And I know the industry has been level to down in the past 2 years. Last year was kind of really the first year that I was rolling for the full year with Bright Referral. And my practice was up 32%.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Orthopreneurs podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Glenn Krieger. And today is going to be a fun day because, I fancy myself as an entrepreneur who happens to do some ortho along the way. And today we've got the same thing, although he'll refer to himself as a businessman who also does orthodontics. But please welcome to the show, Dr. Geoff Sudit. Welcome, Geoff.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Glenn.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. We're going to get to your story in just a minute. But something I wanted to bring up before we really dove into it is I think by nature, every orthodontist who runs a practice has to be an entrepreneur in some way. They're a business person. They might be a reluctant business person, but they're a business person nonetheless. But my question for you is, what percentage of the orthodontists you've run across, and we've been in ortho together, about the same amount of time, about a decade or so, and we both have pretty wide social networks. What percent of orthodontists that you know personally would you say are really entrepreneurial? Meaning, anybody can run an ortho practice because that was expected. When you buy an ortho practice, you have to run an ortho practice. But for many, if they didn't have to, they wouldn't, right? And then there's people like you and me who run ortho practices and look for other businesses, try to build things. What percentage of orthodontists that you know do you think have that in them?
It's got to be a low percentage, right? I mean, 5 to 7%. It's just not the kind of questions that I get after lectures and meetings. We're not trained for it, right? It's you and I. We both had experience going into dental school with different businesses and startups and things like that, where we learned as we went, for sure. But it now there's a lot more with the Orthopreneurs Facebook group and everything else, and some of the course at Wharton now that you can take, and there's more options out there to learn these things. But there's just so many people that blew right through school and they had no experience with this, and they learn as they go. They certainly get better over time.
Do you feel like the more business you did, the more entrepreneurial you became? Like, do you feel it was a function of do you think you're born an entrepreneur or a business person? Or do you think it's something that, well, I didn't realize this existed. Oh, I like this. I'm getting good at this. This is getting better. Okay, now I'm going to open a second practice because I want, right? Do you feel like for a large part of people out there, it's like they didn't even know it existed until they started doing it and they actually like it and want more of it? Or do you think you're born with it?
It's such a good question. From day one, I didn't like working for anyone. I mean, I was starting tennis camps at 16 and DJ companies after that and all kinds of things that I think a lot of it was innate, but there's no question that I got better, especially when you're talking about managing people and everything else with time and experience. So maybe a little bit of both.
That'd be fun. I'd love to get into a room like me, you, and 3 or 4 other people we know in the industry who just love starting companies and find out, make a list of all the businesses we had.
Yeah.
Like from
Totally.
When I grew up in the Northeast, I used to organize snow crews.
Yeah.
When it would snow, I did crews of people. We'd get together like 8 or 10 and we'd all farm out to, I'd come home at the end of a snow day with like a couple $100 in my pocket.
Yeah.
My parents would look at me and be like, maybe we should be shoveling snow too.
Totally. I had a captain of the girls tennis team and me. We started a camp. I think we were 16 or 17 and we would come home with like $700-800 from a big group of kids being there. And my parents were like, are you dealing drugs? What are you doing here?
Yeah. And it's interesting because if you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, right? If you ever listen to Gary Vee's story, like he used to just buy baseball cards and go to baseball card shows and come back with, huge sums of money because he knew what he was doing. So, but with that, let's let you tell your story to everybody a little bit about it. How did you end up where you are now?
I started off as an associate and this practice that I was at in Austin, you've been there and visited, Randy Kunick. It was a big time digital practice, right? A ton of aligners. And that kind of gave me a taste of how digital a practice can be. I was there for 3 years and throughout that whole process, I was kind of brainstorming of other things that I could do on my own. And I still talk to Randy weekly. When
And
it
can I
came to,
interject for a second?
yeah,
If
yeah,
anybody here doesn't know Randy Kunick, he was a guy, I don't know how I ended up getting connected with him, but I used to visit a ton of practices just to learn. He is as outside the box of a thinker as
yep,
anybody I've ever met in orthodontics. And I mean that as a huge compliment. He is different.
yep.
Randy, if you're listening, we all love you, man, but you're
He'll be
definitely
listening.
different, as all of
Yeah.
us are. But he is, would you arguably say he's one of the most out of the box thinkers you could think of?
Absolutely. And I think the two of us together were kind of dangerous. We we didn't talk a lot about orthodontics. It was kind of everything else.
But sorry for
Uh,
interrupting. I just had to give a
no, you're
Randy
good.
Kunick a shout out there.
Yep, yep. So we had a lot of fun together, and it became time. I started having kids. It became time to move back home to Minneapolis, and I started my practice from scratch about 7 years ago. And the biggest thing from the very beginning, I knew to have a successful business, because I always had that business mindset, is I wanted everything to obsessively be about the patient experience, and it was, at the time, it was avoiding long wait times and long paperwork and everything that you hate about going to a doctor's office, right? Bad toilet paper and uncomfortable toilet paper and old magazines and everything else. So my wife and my wife has nothing to do. She designed and helped with every part of the practice, but she never worked here. We sat down and we kind of came up with solutions to all of those things. And there were digital components of that at the beginning with, scanning everyone with iTeros and things like that to just have that experience. But there wasn't a lot of technology that I was using right away that helped get to where I wanted. And as I started getting into the clinical side of things, a couple of years later with Lightforce and a couple of, and at home monitoring, I got a taste of how digital things could really be and how that could improve that patient experience and my understanding of data and financials and everything else. And that's when I came up with solutions on the front end before the patient walked in the door, and at the very end when they walked out the door, to kind of digitize that whole process with Bright Referral and Retain.
Yeah, and we'll get to those in just a little bit. What I think we're have a lot in common related to the patient experience, right? It just that is something I think you're either born with or you're not. I
Yeah.
don't think I've met a lot of orthodontists along my way. I've been in a lot of offices, and I think, like for me, my team. If you were to ask my team, does Dr. Krieger scream and yell? Does he get angry? No, I don't. Um, Name the one thing that will get him the angriest, the quickest, where you'll know he's super angry, and they will immediately tell you wait time.
Yep.
If
Yeah.
if it's a wait time, if someone's in the reception area waiting more than a minute or two, you'll start seeing my blood will start boiling,
We have
right?
a
Because
3 minute max, and that's
exactly.
3 minutes and same thing, hundred
And, and
percent.
and too many orthodontists and people who run practices say, oh, what's the big deal? It's 5. They're used to going to the medical model. Yeah, the medical model sucks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Every
they
part of
take
it.
people's time for granted. And if I make somebody wait more than, look, things happen, especially at 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You have that new assistant who's just running way behind. I will physically go out to the reception area. And I've done this my whole career. I will go to the reception area. I will sit down next to the parent or next to the, whoever the patient is, and just look at me and go, hey, I am so sorry. But things are running a little bit behind with the patient I'm with. The good news is the person I'm with is the most important person in the world to me. And in a few minutes, it's going to be you. So I apologize from the bottom of my heart. And people look at me, a doctor goes down the reception area and apologizes to a patient. Yeah, that's how much it bothers me. So I don't know
I'm
about
very
you.
I'm very similar. I mean, I sit down, I talk to them, I show them that I put myself in their shoes every
Exactly.
single step of the way. And when you do that and you actually think through every step of it, you can, deliver some surprisingly good experiences in your practice every step
And
of the way.
that's how you get a raving fan from somebody who was made to wait,
Yep.
right?
100%.
And there, if there's anything that listeners take away from this entire podcast, and there'll be a lot more, I can promise you. But if there's one thing you can take away from this podcast is run a practice on time. Make the wait times for patients as big of a priority to you as the quality of ortho outcome you're producing,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
hopefully even more, because you can control the latter. The outcome of ortho, sometimes you can't control that the way you can control your practice.
Yep.
And so, agree with
Yeah.
that?
100%. I've got a float assistant just to make sure that is a non-issue.
It's a
So
beautiful
totally.
thing.
Yep.
You didn't mention one thing, and I'm just curious about. You started your story with Randy in his
Yep.
practice. What made you choose ortho?
I've always been a people's person. I like talking to people. My dad's a dentist, so it
And
kind
do
of,
not tell me you like working with your hands. I don't. I
no,
don't want to hear that one. Okay.
no, I started off at the business school at University of Texas. So I was a, Red McComb School of Business
I didn't
guy.
know that. That's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep. And
That's legit, man.
I know. I thought I was gonna, go into law or business or something. And every time I went home, I would hear about what my dad had going on and how he had flexibility with his schedule. He was always there for everything that I was a part of. So I kind of started to look into. I was a psych major in undergrad after I got out of the business school, and I liked talking to people. And I kind of kept on going back towards dentistry and thinking about it. But I knew from the second I applied that ortho was where I wanted to be. I mean, I just, general for me, I couldn't sit still that long. I had to be running around and talking to people all day long. So it's the right fit. And then my dad grew up with Randy, so being in that environment and seeing kind of what a day was like for him, I loved that. So that was a big part of it.
Well, could you have practiced general dentistry the rest of your life?
No, I don't think I
Yeah.
could. I can't sit still long enough to do something. I mean, I remember I was hanging out in my dad's office after we graduated, and I doing a root canal, and I just sweating and uncomfortable, and I just didn't want to be doing that. It
I
wasn't my
remember
thing.
those days.
Yeah,
It's funny
yeah,
because once you've done ortho, it really is dentistry on like speed.
yeah,
It's just like you're
yeah,
jumping around and it's a much faster pace. I like it. I
yeah,
will admit, I do miss restorative dentistry a huge amount from time to
yeah,
time. Like prepping a crown to me is like
yeah.
things that my dreams are made of, right?
Cathartic.
I'm a geek.
Yeah,
I'll be the first to admit it. And the relationships are a little different too, because you might see somebody every 6 months as opposed to
yeah,
every
yep,
8 weeks or whatever the older model used to be.
yep,
And so
exactly.
you talked about two companies. You talked about Bright Referral and you talked about Retain. Um, let's hit, one or the other. Which one do you want to talk about first? Let's talk
Yeah,
about
let's
Bright.
start. Let's start with Bright Referral, and again, for me, my journey with technology and kind of changing my practice started with Lightforce and at home monitoring, and that. I mean, I went from 70, 80 patients a day down to 40. This was beginning of 2020. And it just completely changed my practice and it gave me a lot more time on my hands to work on these things. And
Specifically because of the remote monitoring.
yeah, remote monitoring, and with Lightforce too. There's some really cool ways that I got. I mean, I was seeing patients every 14 to 16 weeks,
Okay.
so it just changed my practice, and I started playing with systems in the practice and doing all kinds of things. And then I started talking with my wife, who's far smarter than me, about just referral pads and how a patient was introduced to me at a GP's office with a piece of paper that had nothing to do with who I was, the experience. We learned that over 40% of referrals that happen that are meant for you don't show up in your practice for whatever reason. They just don't come. So I got introduced to kind of a digital business card, and I saw the first time an NFC chip was tapped to my phone and kind of what that could do, and it was like a light bulb went off. And so I kind of hacked a system to make it work for my practice. So I built this, the way that I wanted to do things and the experience that I wanted patients to have. And then my wife took it a step further and built this beautiful product that is just made to surprise patients from the second they touch it, or from the second they get referred from the dentist. And they get all the info right there as soon as it happens, where they actually learn about me and they can text me, call me, do a digital consult, learn about my insurance, everything that they want from the tap of a phone. And then I get all that data. And for me, in an industry that is so research focused with everything that we do and every decision we make, it's crazy what we don't know about our own practices. And yeah, I mean, I know you're a big data guy in the same way. But now I can see who's sending me patients, how often. I can track my ROI at events and anything where a referral is involved. So that, again, I built it for me. And when we launched this to market, it wasn't to make money. This thing is priced so low that it's a no brainer. And we can talk about that if you want. But I wanted this experience to be how patients, get referrals really moving forward. I wanted to change the game with it.
Referral of the future.
Yep. Yep.
So if I understand it properly, just explaining to everybody out there, you're giving a physical piece with a card in it, basically, to a referring office. And yeah.
Plastic card. Put your logo right there.
So if you're watching, hold it up again. Many are listening. They're not seeing because we're on YouTube as well.
Yep.
But basically, it's a logo-based card that just like a credit card, essentially, but it has a logo on it. You and I both, when we exchange contact, you and me, we both have these RF reader business cards, right? Yep. You just took it a step further. So what happens is you need an orthodontist here. Here's Dr. Sudit. Tap your phone. It opens up. They enter their information right there and then, so that you're not, people say, how many patients did they refer? Like, here's a big misnomer. When you run your referral report, everybody listening, and I said to you, how many patients did Dr. Sudit refer you last year? You're going to say 4, but that's not the answer. Yep. He referred you 25 patients, 4 showed up.
Yep.
And so this gives you an opportunity to actually see the referrals who may or may not want to engage down the road. I mean, your odds are obviously greater that you can get a hold of them. But now you know that, no, Dr. Sudit is not referring to another orthodontist. He just sucks at getting people to actually take action.
Yep. And it's, you can learn from those things, and you can then train, because we track the conversion rate. So who actually shows up in your practice. And, I have one doc who sends me a handful, maybe 4 patients a month, but every single one of those patients start no matter what. So I sent my team, and they hung out with that doc in the practice to kind of hear what was said during those types of referrals. And then we went out and we started training other referring offices to do that with lunch and learns and kind of subtle things and deliveries. And it was a game changer. I mean, awesome. Not to throw around numbers, and I don't say this as a way to brag. I mean, I know the industry has been level to down in the past 2 years. Last year was kind of really the first year that I was rolling for the full year with Bright Referral, and my practice was up 32%. And that's
32%.
That's the only thing that I changed.
An existing practice was up 32%.
Yep. It was, at that point, it was 6 years old, and it was, and I think we're up, 19 this year, something like
beautiful.
That. So,
so I'm just going to take a moment here and say, when you said yes to me for Summit next year, that was amazing. So I'm just going to take a moment here and say, if you're listening out there to the podcast, next year's Summit in Vegas, I've changed things around a little bit. Yes, we've got the most amazing speakers on the main stage. And it's the first year we're doing clinical, and every clinical speaker, whether it's Masmo Shiri, Stu Frost, Ron Ronconi, Dan Bills, John Graham. I mean, the names are just amazing who are going to be on stage. I'm asking them to do clinical as well as management and leadership pearls from the stage. But we have tracks in the afternoon, and one of the tracks is the $5 million practice, where I have 3 speakers. You're one of them. We have 2 others. I don't want to give the names right now, but trust me, they're remarkable.
Good.
We're going to dovetail you together so you don't cover the same things over and over again, giving people actionable ways to grow their practice. Because one of the most important things I get is when I posted on the $3 million practice in Orthopreneurs a while back, I got so many messages, and maybe some of the people listening right now with, hey, Glenn, a $3 million practice, that's impossible, right? That was one type of message, which we all know is hogwash. The second one was, God, Glenn, I really would love to have a practice that's $3 million. But, I seem to be stuck at like 2, 2.25, and I don't know how to get past it. And that's why I built that track. I didn't want 3. I said 5. If you want a $3 million practice, great. But once you get to 3, I'm telling you now, folks, once you get to 3, you're going to want to get to 4. And once you get to 4, you're going to want to get to 5, because the key is do it with quality of life. And as long as you do it with quality of life, you can keep growing. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yes. And there's so many, I'm excited. I love lecturing and being on stage. I'm very excited. 1, about that conference in Vegas. It's going to be unbelievable. But 2, to speak on that topic and, not just focused on companies. There's so many analog, easy ways to grow a practice that quickly.
Oh my gosh.
It's just fun. That's a fun thing for me to talk about. I love that.
Hey everybody, tickets for Summit 2025 are on sale now. Take a listen to what some of the attendees from Summit 2024 had to say.
This is one of the most unique, most impactful meetings that you can go to as an orthodontist.
It has everything compared to other meetings. Entertainment, the content in the meeting, the speakers, the food.
I learned a lot. It helps the practice, so it really kind of checks all the boxes.
You hope to get something out of it that is going to pay dividends for years to come.
Definitely return on your investment.
We take back a lot to our office.
You get information that you probably don't get easily at any other meeting.
I want to blow people's minds right now for just a second. And this is in no way, shape, or form meant to be bragging or haughty, but just experience of building practices, right? And understanding how to build a practice. If I put you in the, let's call it the right area right now. And I said, You're starting a practice from scratch, knowing everything you know, and you get 3 to 4 months before you open the doors to start marketing the way you want to market.
Yep.
Okay. How long do you think it would take you to get to $3 million? Not if.
I think I could probably. I was $1 million in my first year. I was over $1 million my first year. I think I could do it in a year.
You get to $3 million in 1 year.
I think I get to $3 million in 12 months.
For those people out there who think they're crazy, he's crazy. I know people who've started practices in the last 2 years who have gotten not quite to 3 because the economy was a little challenged, but got close to it in the first year. And
yeah, I mean, it's. Well, we're going to get into this next year, and I'm excited about it. But it's about the conversations with the right people. Right. You know, whether it's PTA moms and dentists, and it's some of those areas that people have just dismissed in our industry as we don't get referrals from them anymore. Those are the best people to start out with.
Exactly.
And it's crazy how quickly that can spread.
It is amazing. And you're braver than me. I was going to say it would take me 2 full years to get to 3 million if I was. I'm being conservative here. Okay. And the funny thing is you and I are splitting hairs on this because right now, with no judgment, there is a massive number of people listening who are going to say, it's my area, it's my team, it's my, it's a competition. And it's not. No matter where you are, if you implement contemporary approaches towards marketing, you can grow your practice tomorrow. And that's why I tell people there's 2 tracks next year. There's 8 tracks at Summit next year. Some are in longevity and wellness, science-based ways to live longer that we know for sure from experts in the industry.
Love that.
On one day, and there's going to be things for team, right? So there's 4 on each day, 4 on Friday, 4 on Saturday. The $5 million practice is on one day. On the other day, for people who want to go to it, is the 45% overhead practice.
Yep.
So I have 3 people speaking on the 45% overhead practice in dovetail talks that are crafted to help people grow their practice, because I am so pissed off when I hear people say, you don't need to get to this, my snarly voice right now.
Yeah, that's good. I like it. Keep
you
going.
Don't need to get to $3 million. You can just build yourself $1.5 million practice and get 50% overhead or 40% overhead. And I'm like, A, I'd be bored out of my mind. Right? I'd be bored out of my mind to do it. And if that's for you, God bless you. You and I would be so tired and bored by doing it that it's no more work, in my opinion, to build a $3 million practice in a year than it is to build a $1.5 million practice in a year.
Yep. Well, and most importantly, what's that experience like for the patient? I mean, it is not, if you're seeing patients back every 4 to 6 weeks and you're doing all these analog things. I mean, it's just, it's different than what it can be these days.
Yeah. And again, that leads me to the next conversation. So putting a bow on this one.
Yep.
For anybody out there who's looking to grow their practice, I know very, very, very few orthodontists who are doing close to what Bright Referral does. Very few.
Yep.
So if you're out there and you're looking to grow your practice, you've got a guy who you're listening to right now on this podcast who had an existing practice, who implemented a new strategy and grew by 32% and 19% so far this year.
Yep. And we just did a Bright Referral, like a year into this thing, we just hit our 7,000th referral. So it's growing quickly. People are doing it.
7,000th referral for
on the platform. No.
Holy crap, dude! You had 7,000 referrals in your practice. I'm quitting and working for you, man.
No, on the platform, just in the as things have been ramping up.
That's amazing.
So
and you said you were going to mention cost. Did you want to talk about it real quick?
Yeah, it's $12 a month per referral source. So one general dentist practice that sends you patients, that's a source. So whenever you're tracking that data, so again, you get one extra patient from this thing
It's
and
ridiculous.
it pays for the next year or two.
Well,
So
let's put it in perspective. You have 20 referral sources that you want to include on this, 20.
Yeah.
And I think you
Yeah.
could probably go bigger than that. But
Yeah.
if you get 20 and it's $12 a month, it's $240 a month
That's
times
exactly
12, right?
Yep.
What is that?
Yep.
2880? I'm doing
Yeah.
the math in my head really fast.
Yeah.
But you're
So-
talking less than $3,000.
Yep.
Okay, so if you charge $6,000 for one case at a 50% overhead, you literally broke even.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, I wanted this to be an absolute no-brainer. Now our structure might change at some point because it probably has to, but I just wanted to make this easy for everyone.
People, if you sign up right now and I get nothing, just to be crystal clear, I have no financial interest. I'm just telling you, this is like a no-brainer. So if you sign up now, you're getting it at the price that it is now, right? And so that's one thing. So you talk about technology. Let's move on because we're already talking technology, but let's go on to the next thing. You talked about how to get to where you wanted to get with the practice you wanted to have, you can't be seeing patients every 4 to 6 or even 8 weeks the way we traditionally have. And I think the conversation of outsourcing, number one, which you and I are huge advocates of, and remote monitoring technology. I think you're a dental monitoring user. And I'm a dental monitoring user. So again, I don't have a financial interest in dental monitoring. I do have Remote Response, which is the company that I created to help outsource the monitoring of the dashboard. So offices don't need to put their best team players in front of a computer. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But again, remote monitoring in general, whether you're dental monitoring, whether you're Grin, those are the two that I would say are probably the top two players. There are other options out there that I don't think do what those two do. I do think dental monitoring stands out in another way because of a lot of the automations, what have you. But again, I know people use Grin who are very, very happy with Grin. And I know people use DM who are very happy with it. But I think the idea, number one, of poor care with remote monitoring is out the window at this point. I don't even want to get into that conversation. People say, well, patient care will suffer. No, it's just the opposite. Patient care actually gets enhanced. But the one I do want you to talk to is it costs too much money for me to get into remote monitoring. I don't want to do remote monitoring because it's expensive and it's not worth it. And I don't need to raise my expenses anymore. Because I'm sure you hear that a lot.
Yep. To answer that, a couple things. Everything in my practice, whenever I take on new technology, it needs to do more than just the one thing that it was meant to do. I mean, it needs to be easy and successful for my patients, for my team, for myself. And when you start to dabble in things, and that's not how you see those advantages. So with DM, it didn't take long for me to kind of go full on with it. And exactly what you said. I've heard phenomenal things about Grin. I love Adam Schulhoff, and I think it doesn't matter what you're using, but this will absolutely change your practice. I mean, it like I said, I went from 70 plus patients a day down to 40. And by the way, the treatment was better. I was catching issues before they came up. Patients were finishing treatment faster. It was new technology, which differentiated myself. So, financially in the first year or two that I did it, you pay money to get on these platforms and do it, but it can easily double the practice, production in a year when you put it into effect the right way. When I remember our first conversation about remote response, where you sat me down and immediately my mind goes to, I've got a digital manager. I'm in Minneapolis. She lives in Florida. She's a former assistant who's a rock star. I have this covered. And then the one thing you said to me was, I'm going to give her some time back. Is there anything else she could be doing for your practice? And we tracked that and we looked at her time spent, doing DM beforehand. And then we looked at after we switched and turned on remote response. And I think she was like 5 to 6 hours a week she got back, which is 20 plus hours a month. And, you're talking about an absolute rock star in my practice that now looks at data that we get back from Lightforce and put systems in place to improve, every aspect of the practice. So and I'm paying pennies to do that. And by the way, and again, I've got no interest in remote response. That patients they're getting better messages more quickly than they were before. So it's been a huge win for us. And, I appreciate you bringing that. I know there was financial interest, but it's a game changer, just like everything that I'm trying to do. So
it's funny because it brings up a topic here that the reason remote response started which is germane to every other business we're talking about here in terms of outsourcing. I was sitting at the dental monitoring conference listening to all these great speakers, and everybody would talk about, I've got a rock star, I've got a rock star, I've got a rock star, I've got a system, I've got a whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here saying to myself, monitoring, for those people who don't do dashboard monitoring of any kind, who are not Grin, they're not dental monitoring, you need to have somebody who's taking the patient's messages that are coming in. And you need to review the AI findings. If you're whether you're Grin or DM, somebody needs to be looking at everything, right? But at the end of the day, it's not difficult work. I wouldn't call it a simpleton's task, but it's certainly not heavy lifting. It's not tough. And yet they were taking this rock star, this rock star, this rock star. I'm saying, what you're basically doing is you're taking your best fielder on the baseball team and making him a designated hitter. You're taking them out of the best things they can do, which is direct patient care, training, marketing, all the things they can do to build your business. And instead, and this isn't just dental monitoring or Grin, this is in so many other places in our lives, you have people chasing down people for money in your practice who are brilliant folks, where you can outsource it to, say, Orthophi, and let them do it. And now you got that person back, and the amount of money they make, if you're wise about it, is way more than you're going to pay Orthophi, which I do have a financial interest in. I want to be crystal clear about that. And so all of a sudden I'm looking and we're going, I have so many doctors who say to me about dashboard monitoring, I've got a system. I hate to break the news, and this isn't you, Geoff. I know you're a remote response user. I know you love it. I appreciate that. Your system sucks, okay? I don't know who you are out there. You've got a system. You've got a system that doesn't suck necessarily, but it's not amazing. I guarantee you that, because that's all we do. And you don't need to monitor any more systems in your office. And that brings us in the conversation about outsourcing in general, because I want to get into Retain in just a minute, because I think that's another brilliant idea you had. I've been saying, and Geoff and I talked before this call, right now the economy is not what I would refer to as a robust economy, right, Geoff?
Yep, correct.
I would say
I'm hearing that across the board at every conference I'm at. Chris Benson and everyone is saying it's either level to down slightly.
Yeah, it's a level down. And if you listen to Chris Benson, he'll tell you that 22 was a down year for ortho, 23 was a down year for ortho, and 24 is going to be the first time in recorded history that we've been recording this stuff that we have 3 flatter down years for ortho in a row. Yeah. And 26 is where 25 is what looking at everybody as all the money coming back into the field. The adults who are on the sidelines who aren't getting started are going to start getting started, and everybody's going to start doing a whole lot better in 25. But here's the thing, folks. If the economy has been flat to down and you've been having a hard time finding team members to work, once the economy does turn around and all the other ways that people can make money start requiring more help, do you think, or are you feeling confident that you're going to be able to hire more team members easier or tougher than now? And the quality of the team member you're hiring, do you think it's going to go up or go down? And if you're going to get the same quality, do you think you're going to pay more or the same? And so that's why I tell people, whether it's something as simple as dashboard monitoring, or it's something like finance, or any number of things in your life, why are you doing it in-house if you can outsource it?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. That's why I used Orthophi from day one, for that exact reason. But I also, from a step further, at the time, that was the best experience that the patient could have. Right?
Exactly.
They saw how easy the financials could be. It was something that I didn't need to deal with, and I knew it was taken care of. And that allowed me to grow so quickly. So I couldn't agree more. And that's literally, or that's a big part of where Retain came from as well.
Right.
If I can get into that.
Yeah, I was going to say jump into Retain. And I'm going to put a bow on that last part of it by saying, when you outsource to a company, unless they just have their thumb in their rear end, that's all they do. And I will guarantee you that Orthophi does a better job recovering money and the new patient experience than you can do. I will guarantee you that there's going to be no sick days. Nobody's going to call in one day and say, I can't do it today because I'm busy. They're doing a better job. And you will find that when you outsource long-term, you will save money if you do it the right way. And so with that, let's talk about Retain, which it's just, when I heard it for the first time, it was at one of the Orthopreneurs RD meetings here in Dallas at Las Colinas. And you got up and, you talked about it. And I just sat there. I have to be honest with you, Geoff. I was so angry when I heard you talk about it, because I feel like I should have thought of that as a business idea because it's brilliant.
Well, thank
It's
you.
one of the simplest, most brilliant concepts because, and I'll let you talk about it in a sec, done properly, which you do, it makes the practice money. It's a viable business. It's better for the patient, and it makes your life immeasurably easier. It's like a quadruple win, which is never heard of. So now with that buildup, you better hit a home run.
Easy.
So let's tell everybody what Retain is. And again, I have no financial interest in Retain of any kind.
Yeah, so I'll get into Retain in a second, but it started with the patient experience, just like everything else. And again, my brilliant wife, she was treated with aligners, and she got used to changing an aligner every week. And then all of a sudden she was given one retainer and told to wear that your teeth are going to move as you age. Good luck. And it just, malpractice isn't the right word, but what are we doing treating patients with them spending all this money, going through all of our hard work to give them absolutely amazing results, and then just not sticking with them and saying, having a teenager be responsible for wearing this retainer for the rest of their life. And I know there's a lot of different options out there, and I've tried a lot of them, and they were all either just too big of a lift for me, a nuisance for my practice, with in-house printing, and we can get into that as well, or it just wasn't a great experience for the patient. So my wife ran ad agencies. That was kind of her thing before taking over Bright Referral. And she became known in the industry for taking really complex things like cybersecurity and all these things and making it really easy to understand. And she will be the first to tell you that building software that just works easily, like Amazon subscriptions and things like that, that's the hardest software to build. So in my mind, it's just, this is an easy thing that I want to create. I want to create this retainer subscription platform that's a win-win for everyone. And she kind of slowed me down, and she was 100% right. It took 18 months to build and test and design this thing exactly the way that we wanted. But essentially what Retain is doctors can invite all of their old patients, current patients, and future patients to this platform where they essentially just upload their STL files and order retainers. And you can choose to buy the first set of retainers for the patient or not. And the patient pays for the rest of the retainers in the future. And they do this with a click of a button, or they sign up for subscriptions that essentially give them retainers however often they want them. And it doesn't cost them anything to sign up for the platform. And when patients make purchases in the future, there's no lab bill on the orthodontist side. They just get 50% of the revenue that comes in from that for every single purchase forever.
I'm just stopping you for a second. I want to make sure people heard what you just said.
Yeah.
Basically, patients sign up for a subscription program for their retainers at a preset interval that fits for what they want.
Yep.
They reach out to you, not the practice.
Yep.
And you guys make and ship the retainer to them.
Yep.
And the doctor pays nothing. They just get 50% of the net profit on that retainer.
Yep. Correct. So doctors set the prices, whatever they want to charge for those various plans. And it can just be an on-demand option. So there's no excuse for a patient to not sign up because they don't get charged anything, and they can just do on-demand where we just house the STL files. And the patient has this pretty slick web-based app that they just press a button anytime they want one. They can move their plan up or back whenever they want. They can manage multiple family members and whatever they want to do to make it easy. We handle the manufacturing, the shipping. We use Zendura retainer, so kind of the highest level retainer in the industry. We handle fit issues. The only thing that you would have to do as someone who uploaded a patient is rescan the patient if there was ever a situation where they had dental work done or they stopped wearing their retainer. And that the software alerts the orthodontist and the patient if that needs to happen. Other than that, you just collect 50% forever. We just had a guy who's been in practice for 25 years invite all of his former patients. And I think this was a few weeks ago. He's up to $85K in just instant revenue from old patients. And that will compound over time as he adds to the platform. So I think it's a game changer. The financials are the most fun to talk about with other practice owners. But the part that I'm most excited about is patients get to keep their teeth exactly the way it's an insurance policy for them. It's crazy to talk about, but I think it could change how we value practices in the future. And that's my hope for this is, me at my size, if I've got $500,000 to $1 million coming in of additional passive revenue off of retainers a couple of years from now, that's a big difference if an OSO is coming to buy me or if someone's coming in to buy my practice one day.
It's just a passive stream of income.
Yep.
That's actually in the patient's best interest.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So, and there's no upfront cost. Like I tried to dissect it in a way where someone could object in a reasonable way. Right. Well,
Yep.
I don't think it's fair for a patient to pay $1,000 upfront for this program, but they don't.
Yep.
Right.
Correct.
It's
They
on
pay
demand.
nothing. Yep.
I don't think I should get 50% of the profit. Like at the end of the day, it's a brilliant idea for people, as we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. If you're not an entrepreneur, if you're not a business person, if you're not going to design some elaborate, intricate program in your office, why would you not offer this to every D-bond and every former patient in your practice and say, hey, great news. We are now a partner with with Retain, which means great news. Instead of you having to go get braces again or Invisalign again, all you have to do is order a retainer, your molds, and blah, 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 and it's done. And you've outsourced it. And you don't have your great assistant in the lab making retainers all day long. And you don't have your front desk calling people to say your retainer's ready to pick up. Oh, you can't be here by 5 o'clock? I'll hang around for you. Like, we've all been there. Yep. That's why I was so freaking angry that I didn't think, and by the way, the lab you have making them, I just want to reference real quickly. Can I mention the name?
Absolutely. Partners Dental Studio.
Partners Dental Studio makes our retainers in our practice. And they're great. They're amazing. I love them. Jamil is one of the greatest people in orthodontics. Jamil Abayev is just a saint of a human being. Sorry, Jamil, if I'm embarrassing you. But,
no, and his wife, Trisha, and his team, I mean, they are absolutely phenomenal. And they're partners with us, with Retain. One of the cool parts, and he'll be the first to tell you this, is we actually connected the practice, the lab, and the patient seamlessly. So right now they're the ones manufacturing it, but we built this thing in a way where really anyone, any company, any practice can manufacture these and send them out and potentially take a larger cut. So, eventually you can use that in-house lab that you created to make these and ship them out. We'll just tell you when an order is due and where to send it. And then maybe you get higher than a 50% cut. So we're working towards that. And, the area that we need to shine as a company and what we're going to be known for is not for making retainers. We're going to be a CRM company, an advertising company that also makes retainers. So our job is to keep people on those platforms, keeping their teeth straight forever, and practices continuing to make money from them. That's where we're going to shine through as differentiators.
And let's assume, just to put a bow on this part, let's just assume that you're a practice that does 500 starts a year, right?
Yep.
Let's even go smaller. Let's just say you're 300 starts a year. And when I met with Vince Kokich shortly before he passed, one of the things he tried to impress upon me when we were talking one-on-one was, when you're first starting, Glenn, your practice is going to be taking in a lot of patients, but you're not going to be spitting any out the back.
Yep.
And then at the end of your career, if you do it wrong, you'll be taking in very few and spitting out a lot, right? And then you don't have a practice. He says the place to be is that, and so you can do good ortho, is that once you get mature, the amount you're taking in is ever so slightly more than the amount you're kicking out the back, right? So this year you started 350. Last year you started 325. So you're going to finish less than you started.
Yep.
But the point is, take 300 patients in your practice, which gives you roughly a $1.5 million practice.
Yep.
And you set the price on a retainer. Let's go relatively low at $125 per retainer. Is that fair?
Sure. Yeah, that's lower than what most people are doing, but that's similar to what I do because I want to get everyone on this thing. But yes,
that's why I used $125 because it's low.
Yep.
So you got 300 patients a year being let out. I want you to think forward 10 years from now, when you're at 3,000 patients who are now out of ortho.
Yep.
And for $125 retainer fee, what should someone expect to see as their as their share of the retainer when it's made, I guess.
Exactly. So if they're buying upper and lower, then it's $125. It's exactly 50%. We pay out of our 50%. We pay the lab bill. We pay shipping, everything else.
That's
so
really generous.
Whatever price you pick, that's essentially what you get back.
So let's assume your 3,000 patients that have been done 10 years down the road. Every year, 5% of them need new retainers, which we all know is low.
Yep.
But let's say it's 5% decide for one retainer one time a year, right?
Yep.
That's 150 people buying a $125 retainer. It's maybe you don't like to go to Disney for free with the family, right? Maybe you don't want to buy a new car but you're helping your patients and you're making more money, and it's a freaking brilliant idea. I'm so pissed.
Well,
it's one of those ideas that you just sit there and go, why didn't I think about this? Because it really, everybody wins. And so how much does it cost to get started in it up front?
$1,200 to get it going. You'll make that, depending on the size of your practice, you'll make that back in the first few weeks. And that's it. And then again, you can choose to pay for the first set of retainers, which we charge $30 for. Otherwise, you don't pay us anything. Everything else is just collecting revenue. And the cherry on top is all the old patients, because it's the practices that have been at this for a while that send out emails to invite all their old patients, and then they're immediately making money from it. And again, they're making sure their patients' teeth stay straight, which is, why we do this whole thing.
And I want to just add to that one last thing before we end all of this. The verbiage you folks use out there, and I say you folks, I'm not referring to Geoff. I'm referring to you folks listening. My partner, Doug, once joked with me when I was in residency. I gave a lecture. In Nova, I had to give a lecture. They wanted every single person to give a lecture in front of all the postgrads, not just ortho, but perio, pros, endo,
That's
pedo.
Awesome. I like
and
that.
They wanted you to give a lecture that you prepared on a subject that made sense, so that when you got out, you'd feel comfortable speaking in front of peers and hopefully grow your practices.
Yeah, smart.
And I gave a lecture on first buy versus second buy, extractions. And I was working hand in hand with a pedo who did the extraction. So we gave this sort of grand rounds lecture. And I gave this lecture, and I was newer, and I totally screwed up about why you would take out second buys versus first buys relative to the profile and all the stuff. But I didn't realize what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
And when it was all over, one of my faculty came over to me and said, Glenn, you were so convincing in the words you used, you convinced me that you made the right choice, right? Like he was just joking, but it underscores the fact that the words we use matter. So if someone out there is listening right now and thinks, you know what, even if I have 3,000, even if I have a legacy practice that has 10,000 patients who've been out of treatment, nobody's going to buy these retainers. Au contraire, mon ami. Yeah. I would tell you all, the properly crafted message sent out in the proper way, I would argue could be $100,000 overnight, literally. Crafted the right way, explaining the value of a retainer, explaining why they should have multiple retainers at home, so when they go on vacation, they can bring a backup so they don't come back and need ortho again. Like just think about the words you use. And yes, folks, it is sales, but you are in sales, whether you like it or not. Yep. And so I just had to throw that in there, Geoff. And you want to add anything to that?
Well, and think about the adult market, right? I mean, those are the ones that are, coming around for the second time, and they're paying for this themselves. They don't want their teeth to go back. They know that they screwed up the first time not wearing a retainer. So those are the ones, and they also had kids that they paid for and they sent to college. So I 100% agree with all that. One thing to mention too, both with Bright Referral and Retain, they're both on Mary's list. So you can get an even steeper discount if you're a part of that. We ended up going with Mary's list because they don't take a cut of anything. They just kind of vouch for the companies out there that people have had good experiences with. So that's another way to check those out as well.
And they ask you, and you're giving them a better price.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So,
yep.
Geoff, I could do this all day, man. It's just like speaking to a better, smarter, better looking version of me.
I wouldn't say any of that.
You got the University of Texas McCombs Business School hair. I just want to say that.
Well, first of all, everyone in my family's bald. So what you're looking at is Rogaine since college to maintain. So I was going to will myself out of going bald. So thank you. So I appreciate that.
Side topic, it works, first of all.
It
I had a
does
hairdresser
work.
years ago tell me, start using Rogaine, and it
Yeah.
won't grow your hair, but it'll certainly
Yeah.
keep it where it is. And
Yeah.
who thought you'd hear this on an ortho podcast?
I love it.
But like, if you go to the University of Texas and you walk, like people walk around, that's the haircut right there, folks. I want you to all see that. All we're missing with this is a tucked-in shirt and a pair of blue jeans and a pair of boots. I just
Well,
want to say
you,
that right now. That's the
you-
University of Texas haircut right there. One I've always been jealous of. If I try to grow it out, I look like a chia pet.
You know the way to my heart. You know the way to my heart. That's for sure.
Anyway, today we're sponsored by a hair conditioner.
Yeah.
But seriously, Geoff, it's truly a pleasure spending time with you and getting to know you better. I love your path. I love what you're doing for the profession. It's folks like you who create products that make our lives easier, right? It's like the old BASF used to have a commercial where they said, at BASF, we don't make a lot of the products you use. We make a lot of the products you use better. And that's like
Love that.
Geoff Sudit, right? You're not reinventing the wheel. You're just making it better. And I just really appreciate that about you. And again, if people want to get a hold of you to learn more about Bright Referral, or they want to learn more about Retain, how can they what's the best place?
Yeah, you can always shoot me an email, but brightreferral.co is the way to get to Bright Referral, and iloveretain.com. We've got team members that will reach out to you and get you going for demos or whatever you need as quick as you need.
Brightreferral.co.
Yep, brightreferral.co.
iloveretain.com.
Yep, exactly.
No heart emoji.
That's right. That's right.
Nice.
And I'm just taking a page from your book, Glenn. I appreciate what you've done for the industry and coming out with your Facebook group and your conferences and everything. It gave me the time and the energy and everything that I need to do these things. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, if you like what you heard today, you're going to hear way, way, way more of it at next year's summit on the panel. And I don't want to say names right now of who's going to be on it, only because I don't want to accidentally misspeak if I have the wrong, because we have 8 different tracks with at least 3 to 4 speakers in each track for each day. So, I mean, I'm going to get names wrong along the way, but just know that if you trust me, the 3 people on that $5 million practice track and the 3 people on the 45% overhead practice track are going to be exceptional. They will pay for your trip 100-fold by going. So go to opsummit2025.com, sign up now. And Geoff, I just look forward to seeing you wherever that will be the next time we get to hang out and pick your brain on a million things I probably want to ask you about. So thanks again, brother.
Can't wait. I appreciate it. Thank you, Glenn.